Hey guys, it's Grant Balfour here, ex-pitcher of the Tampa Bay Rays, Oakland Athletics, Minnesota Twins, Milwaukee Brewers, Cincinnati Reds. I just wanted to say you're watching Mattie C's Sports for You and Me podcast. Enjoy the show. Mattie's got a lot of great things to talk about, wide range of sports. Get on there. Hope to see you guys soon on the show. All right, guys. Take care.
On this team, we fight for that inch. On this team, we tear ourselves and everyone else around us to pieces for that inch.
Coming in at 320 kilobytes per second, it's time for Mattie C's Sports for You and Me.
All right, welcome to Mattie C Sports for You and Me. I have a hockey encyclopedia here, and very good person. He reached out to me right away. He is a 4-time published author, and his newest one is The Real Ogie, The Life of Goldie Goldthorpe. And welcome, Liam Maguire. How are you this morning?
Matthew, I'm great, buddy. I'm great. It was always nice hearing from people who want to talk a little bit more in depth hockey with me, and I'm thrilled to be on with you. And thanks for reaching out.
Anytime. And what got you into? I want to talk about your latest book with Mr. Goldthorpe. How'd you guys meet up and really talk to each other and really start to set up this book?
Yeah. Well, it was actually it was Christmas time of 2017, if you can believe. It was 4 years ago. And I was working in radio in Ottawa here at the time. I was in my last year of a 5-year contract on a station. And I didn't know it was going to be my last year, but 6 months later, as it turned out, it was the end. But at the time, anyway, I got a call from a good friend of mine who actually has very strong ties to your Boston Bruins. He has a Stanley Cup ring with Boston from 2011. He was the director of amateur scouting for the Bruins when they won the Cup in 2011. His name is Wayne Smith. He's an Ottawa guy. He was a hell of a junior player in London. He also played University of Minnesota with Norm Maguire and Brad Hull, among others. And
also with Mr. Brooks too.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And Smitty gave me a call and said, hey, do you know Goldie Goldthorpe? And I said, no, I know who he is, but no, I've never met him or even talked to him. Well, he's living out west and he's coming to Kingston for a promotion with the junior A team. And I said, oh, wow, fantastic. And he said, would you like to have him on your show? And I said, yes, my God, it would be awesome. And he said, well, here's his phone number. Give him a call. I told him I was going to reach out to you. So I gave him a call, and the following Saturday, I had him on my show. And, Matthew, like what you're doing right now, obviously previous to Zoom, you had to do them over the phone or on radio, whatever.
What's a radio?
Years in working in the business. And Goldie was, sorry, I missed that, but Goldie was one of the greatest interviews I ever had in my life. And I phoned him after the show and thanked him. And I said, listen, Kingston's less than 2 hours from me away. I'd like to come down and meet you. And he said, yeah, come ahead down, man. You know everybody there. Come ahead down. And so I did. And we hooked up for the weekend and we sort of broke bread, so to speak. And on the Sunday when I was leaving, I said, how come no one's written a book on you, man. And he said, a couple of people kicked the tires, just didn't happen. And I said, well, would you give me the chance to follow through and if I can get a deal or something? And he said, sure. And we shook hands. And that's how it started. And then we signed the contract the following late March, early April. And then the rest is history. It took still 11 months to write it, but it's the thing I'm the most proud of by far. I've written 3 previous books. You said 4. The other 3 are all hockey trivia books, and I'm very proud of them as well, especially who wrote my forwards. You know, Dick Irvin, Bobby Orr, and Wayne Gretzky wrote my forwards, all men who I met and got to know personally. But doing Goldie's book was something else altogether.
And that's amazing that you like you have a channel like that through hockey and stuff. I mean, you're talking about legends like Wayne Gretzky and Bobby Orr, and it's amazing that and I'm pretty sure, and Bobby Orr's from Ontario area, right?
Yes, he is. Yeah.
That's a trivia question for the town. He's Perry Sound, right? Perry Sound,
man,
Ontario?
you got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Parry. I've seen it misspelled sometimes online, but it's Parry Sound, Perry Sound, and it's a beautiful little town. It's growing, not as much. It's so far north of Toronto. I mean, you're a good you're about little more than 2 hours straight north on a 4-lane highway. So if it was a 2-lane highway, you'd be about 3 hours. But it's a 4-lane highway due north of Toronto to get to Parry Sound, and it's a beautiful little town. And I've had the privilege of working Bobby's tournaments. I worked them 6 straight years as personal golf tournaments, and just an honor. Any time you can spend even 5 seconds around the guy, he makes you feel like $1 million. And for that 5 seconds or 5 minutes or 5 hours, whatever it may be, you've got his undivided attention and vice versa. And that's really, really special given what he was as a player and what he means to the game overall, historically. And yeah, it's just great. Just great.
I mean, he was the pioneer of just the skating defenseman, going from his red line all the way to the other side of the ice and scoring a goal. Nobody could stop him. It's like you said, it's almost a Connor McDavid going through every single guy on the ice, and it was a rougher time, of course, during that era. And, we'd see, Derek Sanderson, just a gritty animal out there. And then, he had some troubles at the end of his career, but, in Boston, there's a very, very Irish, gritty heritage around here, and Italian too. And Derek just got caught up in the limelight of Boston and just became a big time guy. And then he goes to the WHL with the Blazers and kind of fell a little bit. So then he was kind of like a journeyman through the game. So I mean, there's so many good legends that that I missed in my time. Like, I have a couple of Flyers friends that it was the equipment manager and the one of the enforcers, and that was around the late 2000s. And the game has definitely changed. And they've talked to Bernie Parent, they've talked to in guys like Bobby Clark, Dave Schultz. Like, there's not hammer guys like that anymore. And do you think it's rough not having those type of guys anymore? Maybe you have 1 or 2 where your whole team is basically an enforcer.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think
the game has changed a ton. You're talking about an era that I'm quite familiar with. Obviously, that was pretty much the era I grew up watching. I missed the 50s and the early 60s. I was too young, but by the time Bobby came along, I pretty much saw his whole career. So his first year was 66, 67. And I turned 8 years old. So I don't really remember him on Hockey Night in Canada at that time. But by the time I was 9 and I was watching complete games, and because he was in the playoffs against the Montreal Canadiens in 68 and 69, I saw a lot of him on TV at that time. And then in 1970, he just went to a whole other level. And there were a couple defensemen before him who could carry the puck in. You know, Flash Holland had a 20-goal season in 1945 as a defenseman. I mean, mind you, it was the end of the Second World War, but still give credit where it's due. And Eddie Shore used to rush the puck in the 20s and the 30s. Doug Harvey obviously was the prototypical defenseman, even though he never really put up numbers. He just was regarded as by far and away the greatest defenseman of his era for sure. And then Bobby came along and just blew by everybody. Like,
I know.
Nobody had done what he did. And nobody did it the way he did it. And I haven't seen anybody until McDavid. And Connor's a center. And Bobby was a defenseman. So I still say there's a lot of similarities in their game. And Bobby was just an unbelievable. Now you're talking about the physicality and the roughness, the fighting and whatnot. Yeah, I mean, it's not even in the same hemisphere, the same planet as it was in the 70s. Like, fighting pre-1970 was very much like it is today. It was spontaneous. There was really nothing premeditated. Teams didn't carry a single purpose player just to fight. And it was incredibly tough hockey because everybody, even anybody who won a Lady Byng trophy, had to be able to defend themselves if need be. But if they didn't go for bad, they got left alone. And they were never going to get cheap shotted. They were never going to get run. But if you wanted some trouble, every team, of course, there were only 6 teams, right? There was 6 teams in 25 years. 6 teams from 1942 to 1967. If you go back prior to 1942, there were as many as 10 teams in the NHL. There was 2 divisions, a Canadian division and an American division. But the Depression took a number of those franchises away, and then of course the Second World War, and then when the Brooklyn Americans folded at the conclusion of the 41-42 season, the NHL was left with 6 teams, and it stayed that way for 25 years. You had to be tough to play, but you didn't have to be a fighter to play. Right. And that changed between 67 and 72. That 5-year run, the NHL went from 6 to 16 teams, and the WHA came along with 26 franchises, of which 14 played over the course of the 7 years. There just wasn't enough guys, right, who could competitively play. So what became the necessary brand of entertainment was, if we can't go out and win an Avco Cup or a Stanley Cup, then we're going to entertain our fans by beating the crap out of anybody. And we're going to be at least the toughest team. And it just morphed into an incredibly violent era where you had to have 2, 3, 4, 5 guys minimum who could handle themselves. And 2 or 3 of those better be aggressors and ready to go like minute 1 to minute 59. And that's the Big Bad Bruins was their nickname when they won those cups in 70 and 72. And that gave way to the Broad Street Bullies.
That's right.
That changed largely when Larry Robinson destroyed Dave Schultz. And then the New York Islanders came along with maybe arguably the most complete roster. Yes. In terms of a combination of talent and toughness. And then Gretzky and the Oilers rode out the 80s. And then Mario had a splash. And then after that, it was whoever was hot for a couple of years. You know, you had your,
I think it was Detroit,
New Jersey, Colorado for a run. And then, you know, it's been whoever's been hot for a year or 2 since then.
Yeah. I mean, you're not going to get a gritty bunch of guys. I mean, those guys were literally fighting for their job, where now in the present day NHL, it's more about, you know, just, it's already premeditated. You know, these guys are already, you know, where they're going. And, you know, if you really earn your spot by playing well this time. But guys that would fight, if you were an enforcer for a team, you didn't fight, you're going either down or you're not playing again. And some of these guys are like, I talked with Knuckles Nyland, and great guy, and from here in Boston, and he came back to Boston. He said, I don't, he didn't really like Boston. He was in Montreal, and that was where he stayed. That was his home, and it's tough because
Montreal's in his blood. It's in his blood, and he is so proud of being from Boston, and his parents, his family, and his closest friends, obviously. And he played in Northeastern, and was a college kid, and a late pick, and came out, fought literally at 6 foot, 205 pounds in an era when the Giants started to dominate fistically. And he didn't back down from anybody. He won the majority of his fights, and he ended up with his name on a Stanley Cup, 1986.
86, yep, 86.
He scored 42 or 43 goals over 2 seasons with the Habs. Those 2 years that he led the NHL in penalty minutes, 338 and 358 minutes respectively. And he was an integral part of that organization at that time. And his heart never left there, even though he played for the Rangers and the Bruins, his hometown team, and he fought for them, both teams, but his heart was never there. And of course, as you well know, you've talked to him. He's living in Montreal with his common law wife, and she's a fantastic lady, and he's doing a great job on the radio in Montreal.
Oh, they love him. They love him up there.
Oh my God. Yeah, he's a dear friend of mine. I've worked many events with Chris. Even back in the day when he was drinking, and since he has stopped, and he's a prince of a man. And I'll tell you what, anybody who does listen to him, if you listen for any length of time, he knows the game. Like this
absolutely.
isn't some fourth line plug who just went out there and scrapped. Like he absolutely, if he dissects a game, he's very, in my opinion, he's very much on point. He does an outstanding job dissecting a game. But I'm biased, I guess, to a degree, because I consider him a very close friend. I love the guy, and he loves Boston. I can tell you that. He loves where he's from.
He does, and he loves those dogs of his.
He loves his dogs. Yeah, he's a big time dog guy, and how do you not love a guy who loves animals, right? I mean, it's the best,
right? And, the other thing is, I've talked to, as I told you, a lot of hockey players. I've talked to Darren McCarty. He was part of the big Red Wings era of just dominating Stanley Cups. I mean, he had 4. I mean, he was arguably dealing with one of the greatest players and greatest teams of all time. He had Fedorov, he had Yzerman, and at the time, Konstantinov, unfortunately, what happened to him. In the Russian 5. I mean, it was just a great era of hockey in that time too. But there was a lot of stuff going on at that time too. A lot of bench clearing brawls, and there was some good hockey in there too. And that was toward the end of the era of enforcers being as tough as they were beforehand. And then the 2000s came along and started becoming a more skilled game. And the legend of hockey is, it's unfortunate because some kids don't even know who Bobby Orr is. Some people don't even know who Steve Thomas is, or, some people, nobody really knows. Well, you guys might up there, Peter Zezel. I mean, a lot of people don't know about these guys. And, it's unfortunate that the younger generation should know their history of hockey like they should.
Yeah, you know what? Well, Steve Thomas and Peter Zezel actually were both skated as extras in Youngblood, which is
that's why
that came out about 10 years after Slapshot, and Slapshot is kind of regarded as the godfather of hockey movies, and Youngblood has its cult following as well. The last bench clearing brawl in the NHL was 1991 between Chicago and St. Louis. And McCarty came along a little bit after that, and he scored a Stanley Cup winning goal actually for Detroit. And it was still, it was still a tough era. Like, there were a lot of big heavyweights in the NHL. It was the end of Bob Probert's career was coming to an end in Chicago.
Scott Stevens, all that.
Yes. Scott Stevens was a Hall of Fame defenseman who hit like a ton of bricks and could fight as well. But there were a lot of guys like him, and Eric Lindros was making his mark in the league and doing it largely physically. We all know the concussions and what happened, but it still was a tough league fighting wise, definitely in the 1990s. There's no doubt about it. It's really changed a lot in the last few years. Fighting is greatly diminished, sadly, I think. But, the rules and the equipment and the nature of the players that come up today don't have the same appetite. You said off the top of the show, you've got your Ryan Reeves and Tom Wilson, but beyond those two, there's another 7 or 8 guys who would probably rather drop the gloves than take a coincidental roughing penalty. But the list is small, man.
Very small.
It's small. Whereas back in the day, even in the 90s, in a 21 team NHL, all the way up to 30 team NHL, every team had to have a couple of guys, even in the 1990s. So that's how quickly things have changed. If you think that 20 to 25 years is an insignificant amount of time, which I kind of feel it is. I've lived through that. It's gone through like the blink of an eye. I mean, my kids were born and raised in that time. My son was born in 96, my daughter 97. So to me, that may as well have been yesterday, and I remember it well. But the bench clearers went the way of the dodo bird in 91. And Gary Bettman came in after Gil Stein really put the first kibosh on it. And once he tried to orchestrate his induction into the Hall of Fame, he was summarily dismissed by the Board of Governors, and Gary Bettman replaced him. And he's been our commissioner, because that wasn't even the role at the time. It was always a president, but he became the commissioner in 1993, and he's been there ever since. So, but fighting has been greatly curtailed. But it's certainly every decade back you go, Matthew, it was 10 to 15% tougher and more violent. Like by the time you get back to the 30s and the 20s and before, the fights, like there's a great quote. There was one of the biggest psychos to ever wear skates was a man named Sprague Cleghorn. Tell me that's not a perfect name, because he was absolutely psychotic. He played in the 1920s. He was actually suspended by his own coach one time.
Wow.
And he was interviewed in 1950 at the NHL Awards. And they said, Sprague, how many fights do you think you were in? This was it wasn't Time magazine, but it was some other big publication, 1950. You could probably Google it if anybody's listening or watching. And Sprague said, do you mean just stretcher cases? He's dead serious. Dead serious.
Oh, man.
And the reporter went, okay, I guess so. Stretcher cases. And Sprague puts his thumb and his forefinger to his chin. He says, well, I guess I had about 50 of those. I mean, so, the late Pierre Pilote, who became a friend of mine who I worked with, who won 3 Norris trophies, he was the greatest defenseman in the 1960s, right before Bobby Orr. I mean, you had other guys, but Pierre Pilote was by far the best defenseman in that decade as a whole, because Bobby came in 66. And I interviewed Pierre one time in front of 700 people.
Wow.
Inside an arena. And I'm on the stage with Pierre Pilote. And I said, Pierre, you're a Hall of Famer. You're a first-team All-Star. You're a Stanley Cup winner. You're a former captain. You won 3 straight Norris trophies. Yet you also at one time led the NHL in penalty minutes, and you took no crap from anybody. How did you manage that? Like, where was the line? That's what I asked him in front of 700 people without missing a beat. He said, Liam, every game I played, I tried to put somebody on a stretcher. Every game I
Unbelievable.
played. Came from a guy who's in the Hall of Fame and is revered. His memory is revered in the city of Chicago. Revered. And that's what he said to me in front of 700 people. I'll never, ever forget that. That was the 1950s and the 1960s. You want to go back? You want to talk about that Toronto Maple Leaf team in the late 40s? They beat the crap out of everybody. There was no team could stand up to that Leaf team in the 1940s. Nobody. You want to go back before that? And that's my point, you just keep going back. I mean, the most psychotic team of all was the Montreal Maroons in the late 1920s. They had a murderer's row. Like that game they played against Boston and Eddie Shore. They said before the game to a man, they said, we're sending Shore to the hospital tonight. And they were successful, but he took 2 of them with him. Like he fought 5 guys that night.
Tough guy.
There was so much blood on the ice. They had to stop the game and bring out the scrapers to scrape the blood off the ice in 1929. Nobody knows this. If this stuff happened today, 3/4 of the fans would take their thumb, put it up their butt, the other one in their mouth, and suck on it like a baby and crawl into a little ball and just go, oh my God, like it was so violent, so incredibly violent, but nobody knows. Nobody knows. So that's the way it was, man.
And I mean, in 2011, I mean, I've been a Bruins fan forever, probably since I was around the Neely days. But, when it really came down to it, when they started getting some runs, the Bruins with 2009, I would say all the way up till 13. With their last Stanley Cup, when they get to the Stanley Cup against the Blues.
Yeah.
That was such a whacked out series. But, I miss the fact of, we had Chara, we had Milan Lucic, who I don't think his career has been as productive as it was with Boston. We had these lines of just veterans and everything mixed together. Tim Thomas was just out of his mind. List goes on. Mark Recchi, just a pioneer. He's been playing for years. And, the Bruins have been a lot more different in the coming years, with these finesse guys. But without Chara as much, I wasn't a big fan, but, he did enforce some hell for this team. He did a lot for them. And, the Canadian teams, I know Montreal's really struggling right now. Toronto, I just with that talent they have is just unbelievable with Austin Matthews and Marner and all those guys. And even Simmons, being for the productive role he has. He can fight, he can pass, he can shoot. I mean, the craziest thing I ever saw was him taking a puck off the face in Philadelphia when he was playing with the Flyers, and he scored a goal off his face. I was like, oh my God, what a tough guy he is. And I've been a fan of his for a while, been following his career. But I mean, in this era, I appreciate the game they're trying to give, especially for the kids. Kids want to see these guys score big goals, and they're trying to get rid of stuff. And I had a discussion about the Tom Wilson incident with Panarin a year ago with another podcaster, and they said actually it was PJ Stock, and so from there it was more like, okay, so you don't see the other camera angles. You only see that one where he got attacked and he made it seem like he beat the ever-living crap out of him. So, I mean, with all this stuff, all this modern technology and stuff, like you said, the skates have changed. I mean, they can mold your foot in there. There's like cushion on your skate like this thick. And with that era, you'd be lucky if there was that much leather on the skate. So it's evolved in a big way. And I mean, like you said, I'm happy to know somebody that has the knowledge of from what, I mean, guys without wearing helmets, guys with helmets, and it's amazing how the sport has evolved. So I mean, so from your era of when you first started watching to now, I mean, do you think it's a better game, or is it you just still have the love from when you grew up to now?
it's a more skilled game today. But you want to talk about a competitive nature, and you look at the Seattle Kraken Edmonton Oilers game last night, incredibly chippy. I mean, there were scrums after about 30 whistles. There was at least 2 fights, maybe 3, and it was a really, really rough game. I mean, even the empty net goal that McDavid scored, he got hit pretty hard as just a second before he put that puck in. There's still games. These guys are still going for it, in so much as it's 2021, almost 2022. It's not the 90s, 80s, or 70s, or 60s when I started watching the game. What do I miss? What I miss from my era was if you, whatever team you cheer for, like, I think you've been fortunate as a Bruin fan, because the Bruins have a style that they have basically played with this style for 50 years. I mean, They came from the depths of the worst they could be in the late 50s. They went to the finals in 57 and 58. They were in the Stanley Cup final against Montreal Canadiens. They nosedived after that. And even in Bobby Orr's first year, they missed the playoffs. And then they traded for Phil Esposito. The whole Bruin MO changed after that. And I think it's been relatively the same. Like, you were talking about Chara earlier, but they had Adam McQuaid and and Kevin Miller. He was that, guys like him, when they were playing for the Bruins, to me, they were rubber stamp, put the B on their heart. They played the way you need to play today, I think, to still be successful. The difference today is there's so many teams, the majority, that don't have enough guys on the roster that still can play that way when need be. You have your skill guys, but if you look at the teams that have won the cup, you think Tampa Bay, their enforcer is Pat Maroon.
Yes.
But they have sort of a designated hitman they can put out. But believe me, if you want to get in Hedman's face, who's 6'6", 230 pounds, it's not that he's going to beat you, drop the gloves, and beat you within an inch of your life like Chara would or could. It's the pound of flesh he will take out of you physically in a game. Mm-hmm. Even Sergachev. You look at their third line last year, Gord and Goudreau. These guys, they will wear you down physically. Even Steve Stamkos, like, nobody takes a shift off, whether it be skill or physically. And if you really want to fight, there's 6 or 7 guys will say, hey, we're good to go. This isn't 1980s New York Islanders or mid-1970s Philadelphia Flyers, who, if you drop the gloves with those guys, you're going to get hurt. Like, if you don't know what you're doing and you drop the gloves with Clark Gillies or Bobby Nystrom or Gary Howitt, you're going to get hurt if we need that. And a lot of teams today don't have that. They don't have it. I miss that. I miss that from the game that I grew up watching, because I see it in teams that I like today, and I see that they don't have it, and that's part of the reason why they're not successful. You touched on the Toronto Maple Leafs. They probably collectively right now are more physical, at least in the Austin Matthews era. Mm-hmm. This is the most physical Toronto Maple Leaf team that they've had in the Austin Matthews era. Whether that translates into any playoff success or not remains to be seen, because they can't get by the first round to save their lives. But this is a team that I think, and you mentioned Wayne Simmons' name, and he's a large part of it. But this is a team that has collectively this season, in my opinion, has shown more pushback physically than any other Leaf team in the Austin Matthews era. And you still need to have that. You have to have it still. So it's still part of the game, Matthew, but it's not like it was when I was a kid. And I miss that. I mean, I love the speed of the game today, but you know, I think if you had said no red line in the Guy Lafleur, Bobby Orr era, it would have been something, or Wayne Gretzky, it would have been something to see, man. Would have been something to see.
Oh yeah. And you know, you had guys like Monty McSorley defending Gretzky. I mean, Guy Lafleur with that flow in his hair just going around the ice. You know, you got guys like, I mean, Guy Carbonneau and all those guys, and Larry Robinson, like you discussed. There's so many infinite players in different organizations that have happened. Like, you know, that's the thing. Like, some kids don't remember, hey, do you remember the Hartford Whalers? You know, and you know, it's cool to know that, you know, the legacy and the history is still being talked about, like you and I are. You know, the Broad Street Bullies, the Big Bad Bruins. And you know, kids are like, well, what's the Big Bad Bruins mean? I said, well, let me get started to 1970, 1972. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's good stuff. And
they were a tough team, man. They were a tough team. And you look at that final in 72 against the Rangers, one of the most violent Stanley Cup finals. And their final against the Flyers in 74. You had the Big Bad Bruins meeting the Broad Street Bullies, and the difference was Bernie Parent. You know, Bernie Parent was the difference in that series. He won back-to-back Conn Smythe trophies as a goaltender, and he is the singular reason that the Flyers won those cups and the singular reason why they beat the Bruins in 74. But the Bruins didn't take a backward step from anybody at that time. And Bobby Orr was right there. I mean, he had over 50 fights in his NHL career, including at one point jumping in the bench to fight a guy. So, you know, he has incredibly talented and gifted and just phenomenal as he was. He absolutely had a compete level that went from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds.
Oh yeah.
And he had no problem dropping the gloves. No problem at all. He was a willing participant in any altercation or brawl, because he was in the era where bench clearers were prevalent, and he was in his share. And he didn't go out in the ice and just pull a guy off and say, let's stand out here while everybody goes. Bobby Orr was, in fact, you look at that one against the Leafs in 67, Brian Conacher caught Bobby with a high stick. And to this day, Conacher says he didn't intend to do it, but whether you believe that or not, I don't know. He told me that to my face. Regardless, the Bruins said, hey, you cut Bobby, you're going to die. And that was basically the end of Brian Conacher's career. Mm-hmm. He didn't play much after that. He fought for his life that night against Boston. They cleared the benches, and everybody on Boston went after him because he cut Bobby Orr. And Bobby went after him too. And the Leafs did their best to defend their guy, but the Bruins just kept coming, man. It was a crazy, crazy, crazy brawl. And Conacher never really played, to be honest, after that. And he won't say it, but it's, as a historian, it's my summation that I believe his career, for all intent and purpose, ended that night against Boston. But Bobby was no shrinking violet, man. He had no problem dropping the gloves. That was the other thing, you know. I mean, the era, like Jean Beliveau, people talking about Jean Beliveau, statesman and gentleman, and he was an ambassador for the game. He was all of that. But his first 4 years in the NHL, he fought everything that moved. He led the Montreal Canadiens in penalty minutes. He led the NHL in penalty minutes. Nobody knows this. But Jean Beliveau was 6'3.5", 205 pounds, and he fought everybody in the NHL in the mid-1950s. And I said, Jean, your game, like, it changed so much. I worked with him 30 times minimum. And he said, the way it was, Liam, at that time, you came in the NHL, you had to make your own space. You had to prove to the guys, the Gordie Howes and these types of guys, Ted Lindsay's, that you weren't going to back down. They were going to run you. They were going to try and run you. They were going to test you. You had to stand up for yourself. Even though he was a superstar from the second he came in the NHL, and he had Rocket Richard on his team and a lot of other guys who were good to go, he had to stand up for himself. And I always thought that was amazing to me. And Bobby Orr too. He did the exact same thing.
So for the super historian in yourself, to talk to Mr. Hockey, Gordie Howe, what was it like talking to him about, that he went through those decades literally, like we're talking about? So what was it like talking to Gordie Howe?
Oh man, really amazing to be around him. The first time I met him, I was part owner of a sports bar in Ottawa in the 1980s called the Original Six. That was the name of our bar.
Good name.
And I loved it. It was a great name. And one night in November of 1989, we had Gordie Howe, Rocket Richard, Eddie Shack, and Gump Worsley all in the bar in the same night.
Oh, that's cool.
So that was my first time meeting Gordie. Then I worked the NHL Awards in Toronto in 1991. This is before they moved to Vegas. And Gordie Howe and I worked the pre-awards. That was the first time I really got to spend some one-on-one time with him. The first time I really got to talk to him about his career was during a very lengthy radio interview I did with him in 1999. And at that point, I really delved into the violence and he was just so reluctant to talk about it. He never wanted to talk about himself. I said, Gordie, we got to talk about the Fontenotto fight. Like, it's one of the top 3 most talked about fights in NHL history in February of 59. And so I finally got it out of him, but it took forever for him to tell the story of why and how why he was so mad at Lou and how it went the way it did. And I said, well, what about your reputation with the rookies? Like, you tested every rookie, didn't matter. And he said, these guys are coming in trying to make a name for themselves in the league, and we got to win a game. And these guys were going to become an integral part of the teams that we're playing against. So a lot of times if I tested these guys and they didn't want to engage me in any way, shape, or form, I knew I'd probably own them, and subsequently maybe their team, and we'd get the win, we'd get the 2 points, and then we'd move on. And he said, Liam, and I knew this, but until guys like Gordie Howe says it, he said, we played each team 14 times. 14 times a year, every team.
Oh, yeah.
It's the rivalries, He said, we play in Montreal on a Saturday night and then take the train with them to Detroit to play on a Sunday. And, nobody was flying in those days. It was all train travel. And he said, nobody crossed in the carts. Nobody. If you're in the dining room and they were in there, you didn't go in. You didn't go in the dining cart till they were gone, and vice versa. It was just such a different time. But talking to Gordie, he was reluctant to get into. I said, Gordie, that story about Jack Adams, you didn't get your jacket, and then 1949, you go in and say, well, Mr. Adams, you guys promised me a Detroit Red Wing jacket. And Jack Adams, the late Jack Adams, he always called Gordie Howe big fella. He said, hey, big fella, listen, we'll get your jacket. Gordie, big fella, you got to do me a favor. Yes, sir, Mr. Adams, what's that? He said, Gordie, we know you can fight. We want you to try and stay out of the penalty box a little bit in the next couple of years. And maybe fight a little bit less. Like, very few guys want to party, Gordie, Do you think you can do that? And he said, Mr. Adams, I'll try, sir. And from 1951 to in 51, 52, 53, 54, Gordie Howe led the league in scoring every year. And Detroit won the cup in 50, and 52, and 54, and 55.
Yeah.
So even though Gordie, he only played part of the first game of the 1950 playoffs because he had that collision with Ted Kennedy. To this day, I mean, they're both gone now. But Ted Kennedy, till his dying day, said he did not hit Gordie deliberately, but Gordie fractured his skull, and he was on the operating table for quite a while, multiple hours, to relieve the pressure on his brain. And so he didn't play again in that playoff. Obviously got his name on the cup still, but Gordie Howe was the best player in the NHL for over 10 years. Over 10 years, he was the best player in the NHL. And he was a multiple trophy winner and Stanley Cup winner. And he also was the toughest player at the same time. So it was quite a, the only other guy that maybe could say that was Eddie Shore. Only other guy. Yep. And he was a defenseman. I tell people all the time, anybody who makes a list, and I you get this all the time. You see it on Twitter, you see it on social media. Say, make your list of the greatest defenseman of all time. And they go back to Bobby, and maybe some people will say Doug Harvey. Nobody mentions Eddie Shore. Nobody. And I say, you know something? Eddie Shore won more Hart trophies than Bobby Orr did.
Mm-hmm.
And they went, what? No way. And I said, yeah, he did. Had there been a Norris trophy in Eddie Shore's era, he probably would have won 10 of them. He would have won more than Bobby. So how do you not include Eddie Shore? Well, he played in an era that was so different. That's not the point. You take anybody who is great, you measure them against their peers, and then you rank them against everybody else. And if you don't have Eddie Shore in your top 3 defensemen of all time with Bobby and Doug Harvey, then you don't have a complete list. Simple as that.
Sorry, special guest. It's okay. So anyways, my final question to you is, where can we publish your book, and where is any way we can follow you social media wise, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely, Matthew. Anybody listening or watching this wants to hook up with me, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm on Instagram. Just Google my name, it'll come right up. Liam_hockey is my Twitter handle, and if you're looking for me on Facebook, I'm the guy drinking out of the Stanley Cup. You're looking at me on LinkedIn, I'm the guy with my arm around the Stanley Cup. And I can't even remember what my cover photo is on Instagram, but I'm very easy to find. In terms of the book, all you got to do is Google The Real Ogie. Just Google The Real Ogie. It will take you to the publishing company, which is Burnstown Publishing. And there's a link right there. And you can click on it, and it will take you there if you want to order the book, and you're welcome to do so. We're waiting, hopefully here north of the 49th, for the pandemic to at least move to an area where we can, like, we're reversing here, unfortunately. But Goldie and I had our cross Canada tour interrupted 2 years ago. And we're hoping to get back on the road at some point in 2022. If not, it'll be 2023, God willing. But the book, The Real Ogie, The Life and Legend of Goldie Goldthorpe, you can Google it. Anybody listening, you want to know more about it, there's tons of information online. He is a guy that the character Ogie Oglethorpe was based on in the movie Slapshot. That's the best way I can describe it. I wrote his life story because he's a real guy. And he is, in my opinion, Matthew, the world's most violent athlete in history. And I wrote his life story. 14 chapters, 90,000 words. Bob Costas wrote the foreword. Hall of Fame media, Bob Costas. wrote the forward. It's 4 pages, 1,200 words, the forward. And when Bob phoned me and he said, Liam, you're doing a book on Goldie? I said, yeah. You'd like me to write the forward? I said, yes. And he said, I get paid to write a lot of forwards. I said, I know, Bob. I just had to ask because I know you had a relationship with Goldie way back in the day. He said, no, Liam, you don't understand. This is one I need to write. And I thought, wow, that is so cool. And his words are in there in the forward of the book. And we've got it on the cover, forward by Bob Costas. I mean, why wouldn't you put that, right? He's revered. He's a legend.
Oh, very much so.
So we're thrilled to have him write the forward. And it's the most proud endeavor of my professional life was writing that book. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to give it a plug.
Yes, and thank you for being on the show. And I'll probably have you on again soon whenever you're free. Big special guest. Yeah, so we'll definitely have to have you on again. It was an honor speaking with you, and you definitely know your hockey for sure. I wouldn't know about the bloodbath ice time. So I appreciate all this knowledge and stuff you have. So thank you again for being on the show. And this is season 3 now. So season 3, episode 3. So thank you again, Liam, for being on the show, and we'll have you on again soon.
Anytime, Matthew. Thank you for having me, my friend.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Mattie Sees Sports for you and me. Make sure to follow Matty Cameron on Twitter at MattCameron23 or follow him on Instagram at MattieC23 or subscribe to his YouTube channel, Mattie Sees Sports for you and me. Once again, thanks for watching.